Hi there, Steve Coffin here. Today I'm going to talk about active vocabulary as opposed to passive vocabulary. And active vocabulary means output. It means speaking or writing. In other words, the words become activated, the words that you accumulate. I'm going to talk about, therefore, active vocabulary. I'm also going to talk about how you use tutors, because that was a question that came up. And let me begin by saying, first of all, if you like these videos, please subscribe, give me a like if you want. But begin by saying that, so much of language learning is a matter of attitude. Getting the passive vocabulary activated, which means speaking or writing, is a matter of attitude. Just like language learning, if you are interested in the language, you're confident that you can learn the language, you're confident that the system you're using is going to help you. All of these matters of attitude are more important than which school you attend or what book you use or anything else. The same with speaking. When I go to make these videos, I don't really plan ahead. I am not afraid that I'm going to run out of things to say. Mind you, I've been doing it for a while now. I just go for it. And I think when we speak, we have to have that attitude that we're not afraid to make mistakes. We're not afraid to be criticized. We're just going to go for it. And whatever comes out, comes out. For example, you will see in a couple of weeks a video that I did with a person named Mike, who is a keen learner of Arabic and who lived in the Middle East. And we spoke in Arabic. And I hadn't spoken Arabic for 8 months. I had done a lot of input activity on link, saving words and phrases. So I had no idea how this would turn out. But it turned out. I missed some words. I got some things wrong. But it's amazing how a significant investment in input, particularly where I save words and then I save a phrase and I listen to the phrase through the text-to-speech and then I listen again to the same content spoken in a natural voice. It just builds and builds and builds this passive vocabulary, this comprehension, which makes you comfortable. And because then you know you're going to understand what's said. And then something comes out. And you just have to trust that something will come out. And there is no shortcut. It is only once you have a significant opportunity or need to speak, and that you get to speak a lot, that your output skills will significantly improve. If you are living away from where the language is spoken, as is the case with my Arabic, I'm not going to get very good at speaking Arabic. But I can build up my potential through a lot of input. Okay, and as I've said before, the passive vocabulary is tremendously important because comprehension is the core skill. If you understand, you will eventually be able to speak. If you don't understand, you can't have much of a conversation. So now how do we actually activate this passive vocabulary? First of all, let's start with what is a word? Because I've learned a number of languages, I'm comfortable with the fact that we're just basically dealing with terms here. In Chinese, most words consist of 2 characters. But you have to know both characters in order to understand the compound word, the fuhezi, which might even be 3 characters. So it doesn't matter to me whether it's 1, 2, or 3. These are vocabulary items that I have to learn. In Persian, lots, especially the verbs, are compound. And so the individual components may not have tremendous meaning, but put together as 2 or 3 words, in a way, they become a word. Is equivalent to a word in English, and I just learn them. It doesn't matter to me. That's why I think, for example, this discussion about whether you learn words or collocations or phrasal verbs, it really doesn't matter. You have to learn these, call them lexical terms, these vocabulary terms. You have to accumulate them. And so all of this stuff socks into your brain. Now, how do you activate it? There are a number of strategies. You can write, which I did for Chinese, because we were asked to write. If I'm not asked to write, I don't write. So I just don't have the discipline to start writing on my own when I'm learning languages for fun. But when I was studying Chinese at a school, I had to write. And I think that accelerated my learning of Chinese, accelerated my ability to speak the language. So writing is obviously a good thing to do because you have time to think, You can look things up. You can look up grammar rules. You can look up vocabulary, and you can, structure something that's a little more, dense and accurate. And that's training for output. You can look into, if you want, your saved vocabulary items and make sure you use them. So there's any number of things the reasons why writing is a good place to start if you have the discipline to do it, which I don't. Then the next thing is, if you are surrounded by native speakers, of course, you can go talk to anyone. And that was my situation in Japan at a very early stage, even though I didn't know much Japanese and I was continuing my intensive input activities. Every opportunity I had, whether it was in the subway, at the grocery store, even asking my colleagues at work to speak to me in Japanese, I made every effort to use the language because the opportunity was there. But if I'm learning in Vancouver, or now I'm down in Palm Springs, I don't have that opportunity. So I continue with my intensive input activities, but at some point I start to use the services of an online tutor, because the disadvantage is that you can't do it 5 hours a day, but I might do it 2 or 3 hours a week. And this person is obliged to listen to you and obliged to talk to you, whereas, a random stranger may not have the patience to talk to you if you don't speak the language very well. And so people sometimes say, well, how do you prepare for a tutor? I don't do any preparing. At a very early stage in a language with a difficult writing system like Persian or Arabic, I begin by, say, taking our mini stories at Link and then reading them with the tutor during our lesson. And then we have a discussion about the mini story. So I have the vocabulary there from the mini story. I've listened to the mini story 10 times. I've read it a couple of times. We read it again online, and then we talk about it. So that's kind of a lead into trying to say something in the language. But once I'm past that stage, basically we talk about anything and everything. And the good tutor is able to ask you questions that get you to speak, ask you questions about things of interest, not just, is it raining in Vancouver? And they keep you going. So it's not I don't have to, I'm not stressed about maintaining the conversation. The good tutor keeps the conversation going. And the lesson is strictly conversation, because I can look up points of grammar. If I have a question of grammar, something that, despite having looked it up in Google, I don't quite understand how the language works, I might ask the tutor in the target language, Persian, Arabic, and the tutor will explain. In my sessions with a tutor, we never ever speak English. We only speak the target language. But typically we just roam around different subjects. The key thing is that I have built up a level of comprehension that I can kind of at least understand what the tutor is saying eventually. I struggled initially in Korean, but we didn't have the mini stories at that time. With the mini stories, it gets you up to where you can basically understand what they're saying, even if you're missing some words. And so then we have a conversation, and of course the tutor has to be encouraging. I've had tutors who give me a pained expression when they don't understand what I'm saying, like, huh? Of course, that's very, very bad. The tutor has to be totally into encouraging you so that you feel pumped up and you want to go back to that tutor again. And then, if we speak for typically an hour, the tutor then, while we're having our lesson, the tutor is maintaining a file in Google Documents or something of all the mistakes that you make, or all the words and phrases that caused you difficulty. And then the tutor sends me typically, either if it's a Link tutor, I get the report through Link. If it's not, if it's italki, they send me a document file of some kind, and it has 10 or 15 phrases. Each phrase embodies something that I had difficulty expressing. Then the good tutors, again, will record all of these phrases. So then I can go and prepare breakfast, and I'm listening to these phrases. And it becomes, and I've mentioned this before, it becomes a record, because I import all of these into Link as lessons, so that I have a course at Link, which is conversation reports. So I have them, say in the case of Arabic, I can go back to 18 months ago and relive those conversations that I had, and it'll have all the problem areas. And it's kind of fun to see that some of the problems you had 18 months ago, you still have problems with. And in some cases, these have become second nature to you. So in these sessions with the tutor, because it's a protected area, and I'm just trying out whatever I can use, you know, I'm not deliberately reaching into my passive vocabulary, but as I speak, I surprise myself. Some stuff comes out. And I don't worry about it. Much like when I make this video here, I haven't planned it out ahead of time. I have some thoughts in my brain. Similarly, I go into these sessions with my tutor with no real plan, except again, as I say, at the initial stages when I'm so weak in the language that I can't really have a natural free-flowing conversation. So we build it around, you know, content like the mini stories. So I read and we discuss them. But once we're past that, we're having an unscripted, natural conversation. It just comes out, mistakes and all. And you realize as you read these conversation reports that you make the same mistakes week after week after week. But gradually you improve. And similarly, it seems like you're searching for the same words week after week after week, as I see that in my conversation reports, because our conversations tend to come back to the same kinds of subjects, and it's the same words that I can't remember. But over time, these words gradually start to stick. So I guess in summary, I'll say that to activate, you're not going to activate all of your passive vocabulary because you need to have a very large passive vocabulary in order to understand what the other person is saying. But you will gradually activate more of it, more and more of it, but it's a slow process. And ultimately, to become good at speaking, in other words, to have a lot of active vocabulary, you have to speak a lot. And if you're not in a situation where you're surrounded by, you know, native speakers, where you're engaged with them for hours at a time, this is very difficult to do if you live in Brazil or Japan or Germany or somewhere and don't have an opportunity to use the language a lot. So you have to be satisfied with continuing your input activity, you know, engaging with tutors online and seeing that very slow progression, and never ever worrying about it. Just let it come out, and you will see, as I have seen, that you gradually get better, but the progress is slow. But as long as the process is enjoyable, slow is okay. Anyway, I hope that's helpful. Bye for now.